Hi, I'm Odellis, and last Tuesday my older brother looked me dead in the eye and said, "Your rent's tripling to $500 and $900 or you're out by morning." He knew my son was in the ICU. He didn't flinch. No grace, no hesitation. Just cold calculation behind cufflinks. I didn't scream, I didn't beg. I slid a thick black envelope across the table, and when he opened it, his face turned the color of unfinished grief. I was the legal owner of the building. But this story, it's not just about property, it's about something taken long before money entered the picture. Belonging, blood truth, and how I finally reclaimed it piece by piece, starting with silence. What time are you hearing this? Where from? Drop it in the comments. I always wonder who's listening when stories like mine unfold. By the time I got back from the hospital that night, I didn't feel like I was walking on legs anymore. Just tired memory and bad sneakers. 13 hours beside a hospital bed will do that to you, especially when your child's breath is being dictated by machines and not lungs. My boy Elias has always been a fighter, but no one teaches you how to watch your 8-year-old gasp for air under a tangle of tubes. The building was still what it always was, dim hallway, clanging pipes, the smell of last week's takeout, and maybe something rotting in the walls. But something new was taped to my door, hot pink, crooked, aggressive. Effective immediately, rent is increasing from $1,150 to $5,900. Pay or vacate by 10 a.m. tomorrow. Signed, Keon Ralston, Managing Partner, Ralston Residential LLC. Also known as my brother. For a long minute, I just stared. Then I slid my key into the door. The lock hesitated, like even the metal was unsure about this betrayal. Inside the apartment was bone cold. I hadn't turned the heat on for days. Hospital blankets and vending machine coffee had become my routine. I dropped my bag, sank into the couch, and unfolded the notice again like it might read different the second time. It didn't. Keon hadn't called, hadn't texted. Just printed out a threat and taped it like I was some squatter instead of his own sister. 8 years ago, I moved back when our mom's diagnosis hit. Stage 4. I was supposed to help support wait things out. Keon promised we'd sort the estate later after funeral costs, after the trust cleared. I believed him. He was my big brother. The planner. The one with the suits and spreadsheets. I was the artist, the dreamer. The one with paint under my nails and loyalty leaking from my ribs. But after Mom passed, no lawyer. No probate. Just Keon slowly claiming keys. Controlling utilities. Putting his name where hers used to be. At some point, he stopped calling me little sis and started calling me the tenant. I pulled out my phone, called him. Straight to voicemail. I waited a beat, then left a message, my voice tight but calm. Keon, Elias is still in the ICU. I just got the notice. Please, can we talk before morning? I followed up with a short message. Just a whisper of desperation. It was almost midnight when he replied. This isn't personal, it's business. You've lived below market too long. That was it. No how's Elias. Just the business of bloodlines and bottom lines. I didn't sleep that night. But around 3 a.m., I pulled out my old laptop, still slow, still cracked on the corner. Logged into an ancient Gmail account I hadn't touched in years. Searched my inbox. There it was, a PDF. Transfer of Deed Unit 4C, Ralston Building. My name, filed, notarized, finalized. 2 weeks before Mom passed, she'd signed it. I hadn't told anyone. Not even Keon. Back then, I didn't want to fight. I wanted peace, family. Something salvageable. I'd saved the document out of grief. But that pink notice changed everything. I reached into my coat and pulled out the black envelope. It was thick, formal, the kind that gets delivered by hand, not by mail. Inside was the deed. A copy of the trust. A letter from our mother in her own cursive. I hadn't opened it in years. That night I didn't, but I held it for a long time. The next morning, I left Elias's lion plushie on his hospital chair, kissed his forehead, and whispered, "Mama's got something to settle." The winter air slapped me awake on the sidewalk. Newark doesn't soften anything. Not the weather, not the people, not the past. By 10:01, I was in Keon's downtown office. His receptionist looked like she was auditioning for a reality show. Big lashes, bigger attitude. "Do you have an appointment?" "Nope," I said, "I'm family." "Not in the calendar, you're not." I didn't wait. Just walked past her and through the frosted glass. Keon's office was all steel and glass and ego. He was seated behind a desk that probably cost more than my annual rent. He didn't stand. "Well," he said, tapping his Apple keyboard, "you made it." I didn't sit. I just opened my bag and slid the black envelope onto the desk. "You might want to read this before you print another notice." His smile flickered, just barely. He opened the envelope, read, paused, then read again. "You're bluffing," he said. "You know I'm not." He leaned back in his chair, eyes narrowing, hands suddenly not so steady. "This doesn't change the LLC structure. I've managed that property for 6 years. Without legal authority," I interrupted. "Without informing the rightful deed holder?" Which surprises me. Silence. Long, heavy. He finally spoke. You always did think this was some kind of fairy tale. You have no idea what it costs to run a building. You think just because you got Mom's signature? I got more than her signature, Keon, I said, my voice quiet. I got her trust. That one landed. His jaw clenched, but he didn't say anything else. He didn't have to. I picked up the envelope, tucked it back into my coat, and said calmly, the next person you threaten with eviction won't be me. It'll be the city. After they get my inspection report. And then I walked out. No drama, no slam doors. Just the sound of heels clicking down tile and the weight of old lies starting to crumble. By the time I stepped outside Keon's office, the sky had shifted from gray to something meaner. The kind of cold that bites through layers and makes you question everything you thought you had figured out. I didn't rush. Didn't check my phone. I just walked, hands tucked into my sleeves, the weight of that envelope still pressing against my ribs like a second heartbeat. The streets of downtown Newark buzzed with the same indifferent rhythm horns, foot traffic, someone yelling about God 2 blocks over. But I felt quieter inside, not calm exactly, just aligned. Like something that had been crooked in me for years had finally clicked into place. Back at the building, the hallway felt different. Not physically, it still smelled like radiator dust and overcooked rice, but something in the air had shifted. The silence wasn't hollow anymore, it felt thick, almost alert. I passed Mrs. Caldwell from 3C on the stairs. She paused when she saw me, her brow furrowing slightly. "You all right, baby?" she asked. I nodded. Getting there? She looked like she wanted to ask more, but decided not to. Her eyes lingered a second too long on the strap of my bag, where the edge of the envelope peeked out like a secret too bold to hide. Inside my apartment, I set my things down and went straight to the table. Pulled out the copy of the inspection request I'd submitted online at 2 a.m. the night before. It wasn't just about my unit. It was about the busted boiler downstairs, the cracked tiles in the east stairwell, the mold I'd seen creeping behind the laundry machines. Keon had raised rents on tenants living in near-code violations while pocketing the profits under maintenance funds that never maintained a damn thing. And I had receipts now, photos, dates, statements from 2 elderly tenants who were willing to go on record. The next morning it started. At exactly 9:00 a.m., a knock rattled my door. 2 people stood outside clipboard in Hand City-issued jackets zipped up to their necks. A man and a woman. The man introduced himself as Mr. Allen from Housing Enforcement. The woman was Ms. Rivera. "We received a property inspection request," she said. "You filed it?" I nodded. "This way." No small talk, just purpose. I led them down the hallway, pointing out broken light fixtures, doors that didn't latch, baseboards pulling away like the building was trying to shed its own skin. They took notes. Quiet, precise. The kind of quiet that builds cases. When we got to the basement, I warned them, "You'll want masks." They didn't flinch, just adjusted their collars and followed me down the warped staircase that groaned like it remembered better days. The moment we stepped into the boiler room, Rivera sucked in a breath. Mold traced the concrete like veins. Rusted pipes hissed like snakes. Allen clicked his pen twice and muttered, "Yeah, this isn't wear and tear. This is neglect." I didn't say anything. Didn't need to. Upstairs again, they documented the stairwell damage and confirmed a few things I'd only suspected. Keon hadn't filed a structural safety report in over 4 years. The east exit wasn't just damaged, it was dangerous. Ms. Rivera turned to me and said, "We're recommending partial closure until it's reinforced." I nodded. "Schedule a fire code check too. That boiler's overdue for a full inspection." She raised an eyebrow but didn't question me. The next knock wasn't a surprise, not really. It came just after noon, heels clicking hard against linoleum. Keon didn't even wait to be buzzed in. He stormed down the hallway like he was owed the air eyes blazing. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" he barked. I didn't move. Following up on a maintenance issue, I said, "Calm." His laugh was sharp and brittle. "You filed on your own building." "On yours," I corrected until the paperwork proves otherwise. His face darkened. "You've lost your mind, Odie." After everything I've done, I cut him off. Raised a sick kid's rent and hoped I'd be too tired to fight back. That's not protection. That's cowardice. The inspectors didn't say a word. Just stepped back watching. Keon didn't care. "You'll regret this. You always were emotional." "Now you're playing lawyer?" I smiled faintly. "No, I'm playing survivor. And I don't need your approval to do it." He turned on his heel and stormed out. Rivera gave me a nod like she'd just witnessed more than she was paid for. "We'll file our report today," she said. "Expect a formal citation within 72 hours. I thanked them and closed the door quietly behind them. That night, I didn't go to the hospital. Not out of neglect, Elias was stable, sleeping surrounded by nurses who knew his routines better than I did by now. I stayed home and pulled out every document I'd tucked away over the years. Mom's last notarized note, bank transfers, property tax filings Keon had submitted with suspicious itemized charges. I found one invoice that charged $7,800 for pest control. We'd had roaches every month that year. I remembered them crawling across Elias's toy bin. The rage wasn't loud, it didn't boil, it settled in quietly like a stone in my chest. That's when I called Janine, my friend from law school, who ended up in family law, not litigation. "You still know someone at City Claims?" I asked. Her answer was yes. By morning, a legal motion had been drafted. By afternoon, it was filed. 2 days later, my phone buzzed just after breakfast. A notification. Keon had filed a lawsuit, alleging fraudulent deed transfer, illegal occupancy, demand for immediate control over rental revenue. He was trying to freeze the very account that paid for Elias's hospital care. I didn't panic. I printed the papers, annotated every line, called in a favor from a nonprofit legal clinic I'd volunteered for last fall. The director, a fierce woman named Portia, cleared a time slot for me that afternoon. She read the documents, scanned my folder, then looked up. "This isn't just civil," she said. "It's criminal. He forged documents under your name." I nodded once as if my bones had known it before my brain caught up. That night I visited Elias. He was sitting up for the first time in days, watching a cartoon with the volume too low. When he saw me, he reached for his lion plushie, then for my hand. "Are we going home soon?" he whispered. I bent down, kissed his forehead. "Soon, baby. We're making it better first." Back home, I filed the last motion, an injunction of my own, and then I waited. Not for Keon, not for court. I waited for the next move, because this wasn't just about rent anymore. It was about truth, about rebuilding a life that someone tried to evict me from, not through paperwork, but through silence. And I wasn't silent anymore. The next morning started slow. Elias's discharge was still a maybe, and my stomach had turned into a tight coil of caffeine and stress. I hadn't slept much, too many thoughts, too many open tabs in my brain. I paced the kitchen, watching the coffee drip like it had something to prove. Outside Newark moved like it always did, restless, impatient, indifferent. But in our apartment, everything felt too still, like the quiet before a verdict. My phone buzzed just after 9, a new number. I answered with the edge already in my voice. "Ms. Ralston," a clipped voice asked. "This is Officer Henders from the City Real Estate Fraud Division. We'd like to schedule a meeting regarding a series of filings made under your name." I didn't breathe for a second. "I'll be there within the hour," I said, grabbing my bag and the envelope I now carried like a lifeline. The office was housed in a narrow building 2 blocks from the courthouse. No marble floors, no receptionist with fake lashes. Just an old man in a worn sweater checking IDs and buzzing doors. Officer Henders met me inside. Tall, quiet, the kind of man who took notes with a real pen and didn't rush to fill silence. He motioned for me to sit. "We've reviewed multiple property records with forged notarizations. The digital signatures match your legal name, but we flagged inconsistencies." I handed him my copies. "These are the originals. The handwriting not mine. The filings never approved by me. I didn't even know about them until last week." He nodded, flipped through each document, and paused at the one with Keon's signature barely disguised as mine. "We'll need to do a handwriting comparison." "Are you willing? Whatever you need," I said. "Just tell me what happens if this sticks." He leaned back slightly, choosing his words. "Forgery on real estate filings, that's felony level. If we prove intent, your brother could face criminal charges. Minimum 5 years, possibly more." I didn't flinch, not because it didn't hurt, but because it wasn't surprising. When I left the office, my phone buzzed again, a text from Gregory. "Remember him, Keon's assistant, who once blocked me at the lobby door like he was guarding a throne? FYI. He's scrambling. Just pulled files from storage labeled Emergency ODO." I stared at that message for a long time. Not the content, the tone. It wasn't loyalty, it was fear. The kind that only shows up when someone realizes they've been helping dig a hole deep enough to fall in. That afternoon, I filed a motion to freeze all financial transfers out of the building's accounts. The judge approved it within 24 hours. Keon's access was cut. His tenants, my neighbors, were suddenly insulated from the wild rent spikes, the fake fees, the unexplained service charges that showed up like ghosts on their monthly statements. It wasn't loud justice, it was surgical, quiet, effective. The real noise came 2 days later. Keon posted on his professional page a black and white selfie crocodile tears captioned, "Betrayed by my own sister. Fighting false accusations." Prayers appreciated. The comments were split. Some called it sad. Others smelled the lie, but I didn't respond. Didn't post a thing. Not because I didn't have ammo, but because silence sometimes is louder than the scream. Instead, I spent that evening at the hospital. Elias's cheeks had color again. His voice had returned to that soft, steady tone I knew. "You okay, Mama?" he asked halfway through a pudding cup. I nodded. "I'm better when you are." He smiled slow, like he could feel something shifting too. "Can we go home soon?" he asked again. I squeezed his hand. "Very soon, baby. The kind of home that stays." That night, I watched him sleep. Curled on his side, lion plush under his arm, the faint beep of the monitor keeping time like a lullaby written in light. And I made a promise to myself, to him, to whatever version of the future was listening, that I would not let Keon rewrite our story again. The next morning, my lawyer called. Maya. Calm voice always clipped like she was halfway through another task. "It's official," she said. "They've frozen his corporate accounts pending review. Also, the tenants voted on a management restructuring. You've been named interim building trustee. Congratulations." I didn't smile. Not really. It wasn't a victory yet. But it was movement, and sometimes that's enough. I used the authority the same way Keon never expected I would to fix things. I called the plumber who used to work with Mom, hired an inspector with no ties to Keon's firm, set up a tenant hotline, offered reduced rent for seniors during the transition, no press releases, no speeches, just action. Real, grounded, human-first decisions. It felt good, not powerful, just clean. Like sweeping out a room no one had dared touch in years. Of course, Keon didn't take it quietly. A week later, a new filing arrived petitioning for emergency custody of Elias, claiming I was mentally unstable, financially reckless, and currently under investigation for housing fraud. I didn't cry when I read it. I didn't scream. I just stared at the signature at the bottom and whispered, "You've lost your mind." I showed the petition to Maya. She didn't blink. "It's trash. He's bluffing." But we still respond firm clean with documentation. We filed the rebuttal within 48 hours. Attached medical records, financials, character statements from neighbors, teachers, nurses. Even the hospital social worker offered a letter. Odelis is one of the most attentive parents we've seen in pediatric ICU. Her son is safe, loved, and healing. I read it twice, not because I didn't believe it, but because sometimes the truth needs to be seen to be trusted. 2 days later, we stood in front of the judge. Keon wore his best suit, but it fit like guilt. His lawyer tried to paint me as erratic, emotional, but every claim they made fell flat. The judge looked over the paperwork, then looked at me. "Ms. Ralston, do you feel you can continue to care for your son without interference?" I nodded. "Yes, Your Honor." And I have. The gavel came down with a sharp tap. Emergency custody remains with Ms. Ralston. The court finds no basis for further action. Petition dismissed. Keon's face didn't change, not at first, but his fingers tightened around his briefcase like he was trying to crush the handle. I walked past him on the way out, my heels silent on the tile. He leaned in, whispered low, "You won't win. Not all of it." I paused just long enough to reply, "I already have, you just haven't felt it yet." Outside, the sky was pale blue, the kind that promises nothing but offers everything. I took a deep breath, the first real one in weeks. I didn't win a war that day, I just ended one battle. But sometimes that's where rebuilding starts. I didn't expect the aftermath to go quiet. It didn't. Instead, it exploded. Headlines ran under my name, "Battle for Newark Building, Sister versus Sister Showdown," but that wasn't why I stayed silent. Because noise clears room for truth, and I needed space to rebuild. My phone buzzed nonstop, advocacy groups, city inspectors, tenants needing rent history, media asking for statements. I slept in short stretches and did the work of a dozen people, but it felt right. Hard, but right. Elias came home 2 days later. They wheeled him down the hall wearing pajamas too big for his skinny frame. His eyes lit up when he saw me standing at the door. I dropped everything, scooped him into my arms. He burrowed in like settled dust finally stirred. He whispered, "We're home." I kissed his hair. "We are now." The first night back was quiet. He slept. I didn't. I sat on the couch beside him, listening to the radiator stutter in the corner. I wanted it to work. Really work. So I called Fayette Plumbing, the same company who fixed Mom's kitchen sink years ago. They came next morning, replaced the old boiler valve, sealed, the cracks bled the air. When they left, the apartment felt warmer, steadier. Not just temperature-wise, it whispered possibility. Then came the cleanup. I organized volunteers, friends from school, community, even a few tenants painted the lobby, scrubbed the laundry room, planted lavender behind the building. We found mold behind drywall in the common room and tore the panels off cleaning until the smell was less heavy. Kids brought splashes of color, potted flowers, handmade welcome signs, little chalkboards with positive messages like, "Please be patient and we belong here, Bob." The building transformed in small acts of care. And each brushstroke, each scrub felt like a brushstroke on my heart. Meanwhile, the legal storm was gathering. Keon's countersuit was piling reams of papers in courthouses I'd never visited before. But Maya was calm. He's playing panic. He has no foundation under those claims. We even found emails between Keon and Gregory's staff discussing how to hide tenant complaints and funnel maintenance money into a personal account. That was the smoking gun. I sat with Maya late one night at her office, circling lines and drafting affidavits from tenants. Even Mrs. Caldwell agreed to give a statement. She saved our whole block, she told the court clerk in her clear, weathered voice. The day the media segment aired, everything tilted. A local news crew came by to shoot background shots, me pointing out the repaired stairwell paint drying on the lobby walls, kids' artwork taped to bulletin boards. They got sound bites from tenants. Odella showed up when no one else did, they said. The anchor's conclusion. One tenant took a building back, reclaimed both home and community. I didn't watch it. Not then. Too much yet. Instead, I settled Elias for his afternoon nap and took a walk. I stopped by Mrs. Caldwell's door with a tray of soup, potatoes, and leek the way Mom made. She hugged me like I was the one who needed it. Whispered, "You've done more than you know." I didn't tell her it was only the start. That night, I tucked Elias in and read him a story about a seed that grew through concrete. He listened sleepy and whispered, "Mama, tell me that story again tomorrow." I smoothed his blanket and thought someday he'll know this was our story. Then came the court hearing to decide the building's fate. The courtroom was packed, tenants in rows, reporters in the back, Keon's lawyer digging through folders with a sneer. Keon was silent, seated behind him with his head down. The judge started with procedural stuff, then looked at me. "Ms. Ralston, would you like to present your case?" I stood. I spoke about trust, broken rents, raised health, compromised legal duty, ignored. I laid out tenant affidavits, inspection reports, invoices, bank statements. Every slide connected. Every document pointed back to one truth: I wasn't evicting a sister. I was protecting a community. The judge listened without interrupting. When I finished, he looked at Keon. "Your response?" It was weak murmurs about business decisions, management strategy. No apology, no recognition of harm. When he dismissed his claims and transferred management authority to a tenant-led council with me as interim trustee, the room stayed quiet for a beat. Then applause, not loud, not showy, just heartfelt. I nodded at the tenants, at Elias's future. I didn't cheer, but I felt something inside me shift, something factory-made and cold, melting into something warm, molded by purpose. Outside afterward, I hugged Maya until I thought she'd break. She whispered, "You did it." I closed my eyes. We did it. Behind us, tenants chatted, reporters packed up. Keon walked by with his assistant Gregory. He caught my eye once like he wanted me to crumble, but I didn't. I was already building something stronger beneath me. The following days, I organized a tenants' council meeting in the lobby. I walked them through budgets, schedules, maintenance plans. I asked for their ideas. We voted on priorities: roof repair, new lighting, safety checks. They listed them. I nodded, took notes. This building had been starved of care. We'd begun feeding it. And each meeting ended with coffee, with laughter, with something I hadn't realized was missing: shared hope. Evenings after that turned gentle. I read to Elias, tucked him in, kissed him goodnight. Then I sat by the window with my own book, the building quiet behind new lights. I thought of Mom's last gift, the deed, the trust, her words about truth and peace, and realized that running a building wasn't business. It was responsibility, a promise, and I'd keep it alive. Because this was not just my home, it was ours. I didn't expect the peace to last. Not because I doubted the work, but because I knew Keon. He didn't lose quietly. The news stations had moved on, the tenants were stabilizing, but I still felt the tension hanging like smoke after a fire. Maya kept her ears open. "He's been making calls," she told me one morning, flipping through her legal pad. "Trying to find leverage, but it's thin. Most firms won't touch him now." I nodded, half listening, while stirring Elias's oatmeal. His appetite had returned. So had his smile. That was all I needed. The first crack came through Gregory, not Keon. Late one evening, I got a message. "He's meeting with 2 investors Friday. Talking about transferring the title of an adjacent property. You might want to check the records." It wasn't just gossip. It was a warning. I called Maya the moment I read it. She confirmed my fears the next day. He's trying to shift liability, moving funds through shell companies. If we don't act fast, he'll leave nothing behind but debt and fake paperwork. So, we file, I asked. Immediately, she said. We filed a civil injunction followed by a formal audit request from the city. That same week, the Financial Crimes Division opened an investigation. Keon's personal accounts were frozen. His assistant quit. And I received a typed letter, no signature, just three words. This isn't over. But it was. Not because I'd destroyed him, but because he'd hollowed himself out trying to beat a system he never respected. And finally, someone was paying attention. Despite it all, life at the building began to feel normal again. That was the most shocking part. Doors stayed open a little longer in the evenings. Kids played in the lobby again. The smell of fresh paint faded into something clean and familiar. We hosted a community potluck. Someone brought a speaker, and for the first time in years, music echoed in the halls, not because someone was blasting pain, but because we were celebrating something whole. Elias started drawing again. Not just houses and trees stories. One day he showed me a page, a lion standing tall over a building with people smiling in the windows. "That's you," he said. "You protect us." I didn't know what to say, so I hugged him and whispered, "Only because you showed me how." Then, one rainy morning, I got a call from Lisa Fenton, the journalist who'd broken the story. "There's going to be a segment on public TV this week," she said. "You're not named, but it's about how tenant-led ownership models are changing the housing landscape. We're featuring your building." I blinked. "Is that good?" "It's more than good," she said. "It's rare. And you're the blueprint." That night, I didn't sleep. Not because I was afraid, but because I was overwhelmed. The kind of overwhelm that comes when survival turns into purpose. When you stop reacting and start shaping. The next day, I received a letter from the IRS. A formal notification. They were opening a criminal case against Keon for tax fraud, wire fraud, and falsifying business expenses related to multiple properties. Maya texted me later with one sentence, "He's not getting out of this." I stared at the letter, folded it carefully, and placed it in the drawer next to Mom's note. Not out of revenge, but for the record. For proof that I didn't just imagine the storm, I weathered it. Later that week, the building council voted unanimously to make the interim trustee position permanent. I didn't campaign, didn't post flyers. I just kept showing up. And that turned out to be enough. The night they told me, I cried. Not the loud kind. Just silent tears that ran clean and steady. Elias came out of his room, rubbed his eyes, and crawled into my lap. "Why are you sad?" he asked. "I'm not," I whispered. "I'm just really, really proud." And for the first time in years, that didn't feel like a borrowed phrase. It felt earned. Still, I wasn't naive. Keon's silence wasn't peace. It was plotting. Sure enough, 3 weeks later, we received an appeal notice. He was trying to overturn the building council's vote claiming unlawful seizure and conflict of interest. Maya barely reacted. "He's grasping," she said, scanning the document. "Let him file. We'll bury it in truth." And we did. Court records, bank trails, tenant testimonies. Every piece of fiction he tried to spin unraveled with one clean signature mine, the one he once tried to forge. As the year ended, the holidays rolled in with a kind of warmth we hadn't felt before. The building glowed with soft lights. Kids passed out cookies on each floor. Mrs. Caldwell organized a sock drive. We collected toys, blankets, even handmade scarves. No one asked for credit. No one took photos for likes. We just gave. And somehow that made everything louder than any headline ever had. On Christmas Eve, Elias helped me hang a gold star on the balcony rail. "This is for all the wishes that came true," he said solemnly. I laughed. "That's a lot of pressure for one star." "Then we'll hang two," he said, holding up another, and so we did. That night, after he fell asleep, I sat in the kitchen with a cup of tea watching snow settle against the window. My phone buzzed an email from Maya. No subject line, just a message. "It's done. Case closed. You're free." I stared at it, let the words soak through me, not because I doubted her, but because freedom after fight always feels like stepping into unfamiliar light. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I owed anyone an explanation. I didn't feel like I was surviving. I felt like I was living. Fully, loudly, honestly. This wasn't just a victory, it was a homecoming. The snow had settled thick by January, blanketing the streets like a fresh page. Everything looked softer, even the cracks in the pavement. From my window, I watched the sun crawl slowly across the skyline, scattering gold across a city that once tried to bury me. The building had grown quiet again, but not the silence of fear. It was peace now, the kind earned through every sleepless night and courtroom echo. I made tea that morning, the kettle humming low like a lullaby. Elias padded into the kitchen, hair wild, feet bare. "Is the star still up?" he asked, squinting toward the balcony. "Still shining," I said, handing him a mug of warm milk. He curled beside me at the table and whispered, "Can we make more stars?" I asked. He nodded. "For everyone who helped. Everyone who's..." So that's what we did. Cut old envelopes into 5-point shapes, drew names in glitter pen. Mrs. Caldwell, Maya Lisa Gregory even, and hung them along the hallway bulletin board. Elias insisted on placing one labeled Mom. I kissed his forehead. "Thank you, baby," I said, "for believing before I even knew how." His smile said everything. By mid-January, the council voted to launch the first community improvement grant. We used leftover funds and a donation from a local nonprofit. The tenants gathered in the rec room, folding chairs, scraping tile. People still learning to speak without fear. But they voted on a mural on new hallway lights on a youth tutoring program. That night, I walked past each door, tucking letters under doormats. "You belong here. Thank you for staying." Then came the citywide summit. Newark Housing invited me to speak. Just 10 minutes, they said. I stood backstage watching suited officials and nonprofit leaders take the mic. When they called my name, the room didn't cheer. It just leaned forward. I told them the truth about how systems fail quietly and how one signature can change more than a lease. I didn't use big words or legal terms. I said, "When you treat homes like stock portfolios, you forget there are hearts inside." They clapped, then not just politely, but like people who'd felt it too. Afterward, Maya found me in the lobby. "You handled that better than most mayors I've met," she said with a smirk. "You ever think of running for something?" I laughed. "I already am," I said. Building a block, a future." She nodded, the weight of that truth needing no embellishment. Weeks later, I got a letter from Keon's attorney. Not a threat, not a motion. An apology. Keon had pled guilty in exchange for leniency. He forfeited claims to every property under investigation, including ours. I sat at my desk holding that letter, not with triumph, but with a strange stillness. I didn't hate him. I didn't wish him ruin. I just didn't want him near what we built ever again. On the first day of spring, Elias and I planted herbs on the rooftop. Basil, rosemary, lavender. He lined them up like soldiers and whispered, "Grow strong." I stood behind him, sun on my face, thinking about all the roots we had to reclaim before we could finally bloom. Downstairs, kids were chalking the sidewalk, neighbors were chatting by the mailboxes, someone strummed a guitar near the stairs. No one was afraid anymore. That afternoon, I found the old black envelope, the one I'd handed to Keon months ago. It sat in the back of a drawer, still sealed, a symbol of everything we had to burn through to get here. I didn't throw it away. I didn't need to. It had served its purpose. Instead, I tucked it into a box of keepsakes alongside Elias's first drawing, a council flyer, and my mother's letter. Legacy didn't need a vault. It just needed truth. Elias asked if we could paint the front door. "Let's make it blue," he said. "Like the sky before the stars?" So we did. And on the bottom, in small golden letters, we wrote, "Home is not a place you earn. It's a right you protect." The paint dried slow, and we sat on the steps watching the sun slide down the building across the street. He leaned his head on my shoulder. "You think it'll stay this good?" he asked. "Maybe not every day," I said. "But we know how to fix it when it cracks. That's better than perfect." And it was. This wasn't just a story of rent or deeds or bloodlines frayed by power. It was about quiet strength. About showing up when it's hardest. About turning silence into shelter and resistance into rhythm. They tried to raise the price of my peace tax, my dignity, auction my silence. But they forgot true ownership isn't just a title. It's how you hold space when the world tries to erase you. And now I hold it with both hands. For me, for Elias, for every neighbor who stayed, and everyone who thought they had to leave. This building once tried to spit me out. Now it hums with our names. Story 2. Hello, my name is Lily Bell, and I was expelled from my home by my own mother a year ago for lying. She told me I was a crook after seeing me in the eyes. My father remained silent as my sister stood there grinning, and I was gone in an instant. Nothing. No home, no money. Here's the twist, though. They anticipated my falling. They assumed I would plead for my return. Rather, I created a life they never imagined. And now I'm in front of them once more after a year of silence. With everything they attempted to take away from me, plus more this time. Exhausted from yet another long shift, I entered in the front door. The marble floor was given a golden tint by the chandelier's warm radiance. But there was a problem. It was too still, too quiet in the house. Then I caught sight of them. As soon as I entered the living room, Sabine's piercing eyes were fixed on me as she stood in the middle of it, arms crossed. A smirk played at the edges of Celestine's lips as she sat comfortably on the couch with one leg folded over the other. Like he wanted he were somewhere else, Evander stood by the hearth, gazing into the embers. "Where have you been?" The tone of Sabine's voice was cold. At work, I scowled. Why? Something that looked like a smile curved her lips. However, I was aware. "Do you have anything you want to confess, Lilybell?" "Admit it." My stomach turned over. "I have no idea what you're discussing." She sighed slowly and deliberately before grabbing a folder off the sofa table. "Perhaps you could then explain this." As she opened the folder, I moved forward, my heart racing. There was a bank statement inside. I'd never seen one before. The transaction that was highlighted revealed that $25,000 had been taken out of one of Sabine's accounts. My blood froze. "I don't own that." Celestine chuckled softly, cocking her head as though I were some pathetic creature she was witnessing come undone. "It's intriguing that your login credentials were linked to it by Mom's financial advisor." "That isn't feasible." I was surprised at how piercing my voice sounded. With her heels clicking on the shiny floor, Sabine stepped toward me. "Are you implying that there were no indications of a breach, even though someone had hacked into my company account? You alone have access." As I tried to figure out how in the world this was happening, I shook my head. "Ahmad, do you truly believe that I would take from you that I would be so foolish as to withdraw funds from your business account? When someone is drowning, they will do a variety of desperate actions." Celestine thought. "Perhaps you had had enough of fighting. Perhaps you reasoned that nobody would notice." I looked at Evander, looking for any indication that he was paying attention. He refused to look at me. My stomach turned over. "I didn't do this, you know." He wiped his face and let out a deep exhale. "Lily. Belle. I'm not sure what to think." Something broke inside of me. Sabine's face remained fixed. Her decision was already made. With a steely voice, she said, "Pack your things. You are no longer welcome here." As I tossed clothes into a duffel bag, my hands were trembling. Behind me, my childhood bedroom, which had previously been cozy and comfortable, felt confining. The door opened with a squeak. I knew who it was without turning around. Celestine, leaning against the door frame, thought, "Wow, that was quick." I guess you anticipated this because I zipped the bag so hard that my fingers hurt. "Leave now?" The sound of her laughter was mocking and light. "Oh, stop acting like way. It's not personal." "A little personal, perhaps." I whirled around, having had enough. "Why?" My voice broke. I feel a twist of betrayal and anger. "Why would you harm me in this way?" Celestine put a fictitious palm on her heart. I took no action. "But you, nevertheless." She left the words lingering. Her smile grew. "Mom always warned you to handle money carefully." My veins ached with rage, but I forced myself to swallow it. I wouldn't allow her to witness my breakdown. There were footsteps. Evander was standing in the doorway when I turned around. For a brief period, I glimpsed something in his unreadable look. Shame. "Dad," I muttered. "Please, I wouldn't, you know." He clenched his jaw. "You ought to leave. I got a lump in my throat." Behind him, Sabine emerged with an envelope in her hand. "You should get this." "Goodbye," she murmured in a tone that was almost contemptuous. I took it open. Just $200. That was it. I was just worth that to them. I shoved the envelope into my pocket while clenching my jaw. As I passed Celestine, she moved out of the way. "Good luck, loser." As the front door banged behind me, she muttered, her laughter resonating. My skin felt cold in the night air. As I stood on the pavement, clutching my duffel bag, the drizzle had turned into a persistent rain that was seeping through my jacket. I had nowhere to go. The fact of it became clear. Heavier than I had anticipated. Being played favorites, I had always understood that Celestine could manipulate reality to fit her own agenda. However, I never imagined that they would truly reject me. I had been trying to prove myself to them for years. For what purpose? In my pocket, my phone buzzed. Just one text. "This is something you'll regret." I couldn't tell if it was Celestine or Sabine. Perhaps both. As I got on the bus, the rain made the city lights hazy. I didn't turn around. I was no longer living in that residence. I came back a year later. They never imagined her to be the girl they left behind. Leaning back in her leather chair, Sabine tapped the surface with her manicured nails. She didn't want to trust the account of the lost money that the bank statement in front of her told. I never held the $25,000 that had allegedly been taken. Celestin had been identified as the source. The paper crumpled slightly as her fingers curled around it. The ramifications ran through her head. She would appear foolish if this were ever made public. Because of a falsehood, she had expelled her daughter from the home. She called in a harsh voice, Celestin. As if she owned the workplace, Celestin walked in with a waltz. One hand holds a Starbucks cup while the other holds a phone. Yes, say the statement was held up. Would you mind explaining? Celestin gave it a fleeting glance and shrugged. Oh, that. She took a drink of coffee. Calm down, Mom. You can afford it after all. Sabine's nose wrinkled. You gave me the impression that Lily Bell had stolen from me. I threw her out as you sat there and watched. After rolling her eyes, Celestin left. It's finished. Nobody's interested. Sabine's jaw was squeezed so tightly that her teeth ached. She whispered, you're lucky that I'm cleaning up your mess. Celestia grinned over her cup's rim. I am aware. The soft murmur of the city's elite filled the restaurant. I wouldn't have entered a location like this one a year ago. I fit in. A man in a fitted suit was seated across from me. He slid a document across the table while evaluating me with his eyes. Just 2 million bao, he said. In your name, a startup investment. Miss Renard, you've performed admirably. Flipping through the pages, I picked up the contract. Money wasn't the only factor. It served as confirmation. Evidence that I had recovered from nothing. My name was signed without hesitation. You're not simply interested in business here, are you? The man watched. I looked him in the eye. No, it's intimate. My phone started to buzz as I got up to go. An address, a time, a text, or a family get-together at that residence. Excellent. I smoothed the front of my dress and put my phone aside. Let's examine the extent of the changes. I wasn't the same girl who had left the house a year prior, but the house still had the same appearance. The air changed as soon as I entered. With a glass of wine in her hand, Sabine stood close to the staircase. The fancy chain around her neck is as false as her grin. Seated on a sofa arm, Celestin glanced up from her phone, her eyes darting anxiously. Evander avoided my eyes as he swirled a drink by the hearth. There was silence for a while. Finally, in a strained tone, Sabine remarked, You look well. You don't, I responded with ease. Celestin laughed. That didn't take long at all. I moved farther into the room, ignoring her. It was the same in every detail. The lighting, the furnishings, and even the subtle hint of Sabine's pricey perfume. I felt as though I had entered a museum of my history. I wasn't here to look at the exhibitions, though. My purpose was to set the place on fire. I knew one thing when I sat down. I refused to go until they were fully aware of who I had become. They believed I had forgotten. They believed I had forgiven them. They were mistaken. The layout of the dining area looked like it was from a magazine. All right. Crystal glasses from China, and wonderfully placed focal point. However, the tension that permeated the air could not be concealed by any amount of tastefully chosen decor. As she speared a piece of asparagus with her fork across from her, Sabine sat at the head of the table with a calm expression. Evander quietly nursed his drink. Celestine pretended not to be interested as she browsed through her phone. And me. As I sat there, I watched them perform their parts in this bizarre little show. With a silky voice, Sabine started. Tell us, Lily Bell, what you have been up to during the past year. I sipped my wine while we worked out the question. Oh, I said casually, surviving. Actually, thriving. Sabine's countenance remained bland despite her eyes flickering. I'm glad to hear that. Celestine gave a snort. Please, you most likely struck it lucky when a wealthy man threw money at you. I looked over at her. Given that I generated my own fortune, this is an intriguing assumption. However, you haven't always been good with money, have you? I noticed the tiniest hint of discomfort in Celestine's eyes as she tensed up. After that, she aired. I'm not struggling financially like Mom is. Muttering, she jabbed a touch too forcefully at her salad. The room became silent. Sabine's hands clenched around her wine glass until her knuckles became white. Evander's brow furrowed when he finally looked up from his glass. Financial challenges. I tilted my head and repeated. It's funny. I believed you were in control of everything. Sabine's response came instantly. With a stern warning, her head swung toward Celestin. Take a look. Stein made an effort to turn around. I simply meant that lately things have been tight. That's all. I put down my fork. You mean the money that's missing? Stein's face turned pale. Although Sabine's face was still unreadable, I could tell that her stance had changed, and that she appeared to be suddenly more attentive. Evander's frown deepened as he glanced between them. How much money? I rested my elbows on the table and leaned forward. Did you know, Dad, that last year I wasn't really missing the $25,000 I was accused of stealing? He blinked. What? As silky as ever, Sabine's voice interrupted. Lily. Belle, enough. Because I disregarded her. With my eyes fixed on Celestin, I spoke. Dad does too. No longer was the table used for meals, it was a battleground. Sabine's tone was piercing. This is absurd. Now Celestin was shaking. She's telling lies. She's attempting to make you oppose me. Evander threw down his drink. The tense air was broken by the sound. Enough. The truth is what I want. I took out a folded piece of paper from within my purse. A statement from a bank. Watching Silverstein's breath catch as she recognized it, I slid it over the table. Evander took it up and looked at the page. He tightened his hold on the paper. Celestin. He spoke slowly and with a tone of incredulity. This is your account. Now Silverstein was clearly in a panic. I can clarify. I reclined in my seat. Are you happy Mom blamed me for the years you've been stealing from her? A dense and oppressive silence descended upon the table. Sabine opened her mouth to speak, but for the first time nothing came out. Then she finally said anything. Is that accurate? Celestin's mouth parted. However, I was already aware. Her next words would alter the course of events. My mother understood she had lost for the first time, and my father defended me for the first time. Silverstein's gaze swept over the room, looking for a way out, for a way to make things work in her favor. However, there was no escape. She's making things up, Mom. Her voice lost its characteristic sharpness as she stammered. She's exaggerating the situation. Evander didn't give me a glance. With the bank statement still gripped in his fist, he continued to concentrate on Celestin. Be honest with me, he made a demand. Silverstein's mouth quivered. I needed the cash. I intended to repay it. Although Sabine's face was unreadable, I could see the tenseness in her jaw and shoulders. Because of a falsehood, you allowed me to expel Lily Bell from this house. Silently, she said. Silverstein's breath caught in his throat. In any case, you wouldn't have trusted me. I saw the first cracks appear in Sabine's mask. Her mind was racing, doing calculations, and determining how to bury this as effectively as possible. She refused to acknowledge her mistake. She didn't. At last, Sabine smoothed her tone back into control and stated, I don't care about the past. What comes next is what counts. The cutlery shook as Anders' hand slammed into the table. No, the truth is what counts. For the first time in my life, the room's atmosphere changed. My father wasn't merely an observer. Lily Bell was correct all along, he replied in a steady voice that nearly calmed Sabine, who suddenly looked at him. What do you say? Evander went on. I'm saying that I'm done ignoring this. Celestine laughed nervously. Come on, this is absurd, Dad. I reclined in my seat, observing Sabine's calm look begin to falter. Do your own research on the financial records, Dad, if you don't believe me. Sabine let out a loud sigh. This is ridiculous. Nothing is being made into a show by you. However, it was too late. Evander had stopped listening to her. He got up and pushed his chair back. I'm going to find the truth because I want it. He was not stopped by Sabine. She was unable to. My father moved away from my mother and toward me for the first time. The light in the hallway was low. The chandelier's wavering light created lengthy shadows on the walls. Before Sabine's voice slithered through the silence, I heard the gentle click of heels behind me. You have no idea what you're doing, she whispered. Without hesitation, I turned and looked into her eyes. No, Mother. You don't. She moved in closer. Her tone was gentle yet piercing. Do you believe you have won? You're not aware of my abilities. I didn't back down. Her breath cooled across my cheek as she drew closer. You ought to have stayed away, she said, because there is no turning back now. I didn't recoil. I remained silent. I simply turned and left. The match was far from over. It was only beginning. It was warm in the cafe. The air was heavy with the aroma of roasted coffee beans. The rain pattered on the wide window next to me. The warmth of the chandelier lights above feels almost personal because of the constant gloom of Seattle. Celestine was seated across from me holding a cappuccino in her hands. She hadn't sipped from it, she had changed appearance. Not in a physical sense, but in her posture. Less arrogance, more circumspect. She said, "I want to make things right," in a softer voice than I could ever recall. I studied her leaning back in my chair. "Do you?" She gave a quick exhale. "Look, I realize I made a mistake. But like you, Mama, I was stuck. She is in charge of everything." "Do you believe I had an option?" I sneered. "There was always an option. You simply enjoy the advantages of sticking by her side." Celestine winced. I felt afraid. "You have no idea how it feels." "No, I don't. I made a humorous clip. As you laughed, I seemed to recall getting ejected in the rain." Glancing down at her unfinished coffee, she winced. "I'm worthy of that." A moment's pause. I nearly trusted her. "Why now then?" I asked, closely observing her. What was different? Although her apartment was smaller than I had anticipated, it was nevertheless elegant and nicely furnished in cool blues and grays, as though making an effort to appear stable was too much. Celestine handed me one glass of wine and poured another. Her voice was exceptionally quiet as she said, "I just want us to talk." I accepted the glass but did not take a sip. "Okay, speak." She paused. "She's Mom. She's having more trouble than she admits." I wondered whether we could. On the coffee table, her phone buzzed and a message appeared on the screen. "Is she present?" I immediately recognized the sender. Sabine. I put down my glass. "You didn't mean a word, did you?" Celestine tensed. "That isn't the case." I grabbed a phone and swiveled the screen in her direction. "Then describe this." She took a deep breath. She gripped her glass with her fingers. "Mom just wants to communicate." "Quickly," she said. "That's all." I gave a sharp, frigid laugh. "Celestine, she's silent. She exerts control. She distorts reality to the point where you can't tell which way is up." "How about you?" I pointed to her. Her favorite puppet was you. I raised a hand as Celestine stood approaching me. "Don't," I cautioned. She shook her head and let out a breath. "You're not understanding." "No, I do." I spoke in a steady, controlled tone, and I'll tell you something once, so pay close attention. I will annihilate you both if you try this again. Silverstein's face faltered. For the first time, doubt flickered in her eyes. However, it was insufficient. She smirked against her will. "We'll see who prevails, I suppose." I didn't respond. I had already decided what to do. Her final card had been played by Sabine. It was my time now. With my fingertips delicately resting on the rim of my wine glass, I sat in my apartment. Beyond the window, the city lights flickered, yet something didn't feel quite right. Like I was being watched, a persistent sensation tore at the corners of my thoughts. I dismissed it. I wasn't going to let paranoia to consume me since it was a hazardous thing. Then the door was knocked on 3 sharply. My heart pounded slowly but steadily as I stood. I had no expectations. Celestine was standing there, pallid and damp from the rain as I opened it. "That's it," she exhaled. I remained motionless. Define over. After swallowing, she entered without asking permission. "She's lost everything, Mom." I cocked my head. "And what does that imply to me specifically?" Celestine paused. Once immaculate, well-maintained, and a testament to Sabine's authority, her office was now a disaster scene. There were piles of papers all over the place, and the air smelled of whiskey that had been spilled. Executives were standing close to the doorway, whispering to one another, avoiding her eyes. Evander folded his arms and stood opposite her. There was no denying the change in power. He informed her it was finished. "You were defeated." Sabine laughed sharply and without humor. "Do you really believe I created all of this so you could take it away from me?" Anders' face remained unchanged. "This is what you done to yourself." Her hands trembled as she paced, but her voice remained steady. "I'm still in control." He scowled. "What are you discussing?" Something deadly glinted in her eyes as she turned. Slowly she continued, "If I go down, I'm bringing her along." Sabine wouldn't go quietly, and I should have known that. I nearly disregarded the call when she made it. However, I had a gut feeling that I couldn't escape this conversation. I reached the meeting location, a classy lounge with pricey decor and low lighting. She was seated already. "I'm holding a glass of wine." Her face was unreadable. You look good, she said with ease. She was seated across from me. Stop the act. She swirled her drink and sighed. Lily, we don't have to do this, Belle. We are able to repair it. Collaborate. I gave a little chuckle. Collaborate just as we did when you threw me away empty-handed. She put down her drink a bit too firmly. It was an error. It was a decision no. After taking a big breath, she leaned forward and spoke in a whisper. You don't know what kind of adversaries you're creating. I didn't recoil. Furthermore, you don't know who you're interacting with. Sabine's disguise broke. Do you believe you have won? She gave a hiss. You remain nothing more than a silly girl acting. I grinned. So, why do you appear so afraid? She tightened her jaw. She was aware that she was losing control. I got up and adjusted my coat. I said, Goodbye, Mother. And she appeared terrified for the first time. The game was lost by Sabine. She had to deal with the repercussions now. The fragrance of polished wood and costly despair filled the law office. In the leather chair, Sabine sat rigidly. Across from her, her immaculately trimmed nails tapped the armrest in a deliberate, methodical pattern. As he flipped through the pile of legal documents in front of them, her lawyer straightened his tie. This isn't good, he said, hardly looking at her. Sabine crossed her legs and scoffed. You don't get paid for making blatant claims. I pay you to solve issues. Her lawyer paused. All of your assets are frozen. The number of litigation is increasing. You may say, Ben, if this has to go to trial. She waved her hand sharply, cutting him off. He can't keep his money if I can't. Her voice lowered as she leaned forward. This can be resolved in a few different ways. Perhaps some documents are misplaced. Perhaps a deal has already been made. Before she could finish, the door sprang open. Evander entered. She tensed up. Her back tensed up. He had changed appearance, more powerful, steadier. Then she noticed that he had a folder in his hand, sturdy and thick. He set it down before her. This is it, he remarked in a soothing, even pitying tone. Every stolen cash, every falsified signature, all lies. Sabine's fingers quivered, but she made herself stay calm. I can't be subjected to this. Her attorney averted his gaze and cleared his voice. Nothing remains for which to fight. No one was listening for the first time in her life. The flat where Silverstein lived has changed. The pricey furniture was still there, but it had lost its vitality. There were half of the paintings missing. In the corner were some cardboard boxes that had been clumsily taped. With a practically empty glass of wine in her hand, she sat on the couch. I had it all, she whispered. I have nothing now. I watched her while leaning against the doorway. Because you allowed her to define you, you had everything. I said? You don't know who that is without her, so you're left with nothing. Celestine laughed brittlely. I believed that I was unique. I believed I was unique. She gave a headshake. However, I was merely a pawn. I saw it for the first time. Knowledge. I'm sorry. Her eyes were beseeching as she glanced up at me. And then what should I do? I didn't respond. I simply turned and left. I was surprised by how cold the courtroom was. In front of the judge, Sabine stood. I could see the stiffness in her jaw and the way her shoulders straightened a bit too tightly, even though her countenance was deliberately blank. Everything was laid out by the prosecution. Deception. Avoiding taxes. Manipulation. At last, the years of dishonesty came to light. Evander's voice was clear and steady. By destroying people, dominating, misleading, and getting rid of everyone who wasn't useful to her anymore, she established an empire. Sabine remained silent. I watched from the gallery. I was not happy. This was merely finality, not satisfaction. The judge raised the gavel and straightened. The defendant is found guilty by the court. My mother was now no longer untouchable. All her life she had struggled for dominance. She had none now. The visitation room in the prison was sterile. The walls are white, and the air has a little bleach odor. It was the sort of location where people's illusions were taken away, leaving only reality. Sitting opposite me in an orange jumpsuit was Sabine. Her hair was lifeless. The weight of her demise now marks her once immaculate complexion. For a long time, she appeared smaller than I had ever seen her. Neither of us said anything. Then she leaned forward and let out a breath. Do you believe you have won? There was still a hint of the woman she once was in her voice. The one that never bowed, who demanded, who commanded. However, she had lost her ability to fight. I cocked my head in contemplation of what she had said. Then I grinned. No, I responded, Mother. I simply turned to leave. There was a brief flare in her eyes. My weakness was never you. I went on speaking steadily. All you were was my history. The scent of stale cigarettes and hopelessness filled the motel. With hesitation, Celestine opened the door. Her posture had gone from flawless to a little slumped. An oversized hoodie and leggings that appeared to have been left unwashed for days took the place of the luxury clothing. "I didn't anticipate your presence," she acknowledged, raw voice. I entered and looked around the little poorly lighted space. It was nothing like the opulence she used to show off. "Celestine, what am I doing here?" In a neutral tone, I inquired. She sat on the bed and combed through her matted hair with a trembling hand. Without her, I'm not sure who I am. It was there, the reality. I took a moment to observe her. I ought to have sensed something. Perhaps sympathy, but I didn't. "There are two options available to you. Just figure it out, or don't," I said. "It's not my problem anyway." She opened her mouth to speak, but she was at a loss for words. I walked over to the door. "I have nothing to repay you." "Over my shoulder," I said, and I meant it for the first time. From my new office, I could see the metropolitan skyline with glass skyscrapers reflecting the sun's fading yellow. I'd never worked in an office like that before, since I owned this one. I was startled out of my reverie by a knock on the door. With his hands in his pockets and a tentative expression on his face, Evander stood there. "Nice location," he said. I gave a nod. "Yes, it is." He moved a little. "I simply wanted to let you know that I realize I let you down." I breathed out slowly. "Yes, you did." There was silence between us, but it wasn't awkward. It simply was. He glanced at me and then down. "I want to make things right." I smiled at him, but not in an inviting way. "Dad, some things are unfixable." After he understood, he nodded and walked away. I looked back out the window and saw the city lights come on. Not a ghost. No regrets, only the future. I owe no one anything for the first time in my life. There are scars that never go away. You don't have to stare at them all the time, though. The letter was concealed in a drawer I hadn't opened in years, sandwiched between old books. The edges of the paper were a little yellowed, but my calligraphy was still legible. I gently unfolded it in desperation, looking over the sentences I had previously written to Sabine. "All I want to know is why. I'm not sure what I did incorrectly. Tell me the truth, please." I gave a quick breath. I let out a low-pitched laugh. I had pleaded for clarification and recognition. Now she needed to see me. There was absolutely nothing I needed from her. I immediately threw the letter into the fireplace after crumpling it. The past was reduced to ash as the flames twisted around the paper. I saw it burn. Feeling nothing, I waited for something that would never come for far too long. I whispered. I'd finished waiting. There was silence in the coffee shop. The hustle of the early morning has subsided. Celestine was seated opposite me, a ceramic mug encircling her fingers, her fingernails cracked. Not at all like the woman who used to show off her easy perfection and designer purses. She made no request for money. She offered no justifications. "I botched up," she remarked with a simple sigh. As I watched her, I swirled my coffee. "Yes, you did." She shook her head and gave a feeble laugh. "You won't make this simple, will you?" I sipped. "Did I ever have an easy time?" Celestine nodded slowly, looking down. She said, "I didn't expect forgiveness. I suppose I just wanted to let you know. Now I see it. Everything I allowed to happen, everything I did, those were phrases that would have mattered once. A moment when I would have held on to them in the hopes that they held significance. They were only words now. Now what?" Her voice became quieter as she inquired. As before, I looked out the window and saw the metropolis progressing. Sincerely, I said I don't know, but I'll be all right whatever it is. Celestine also refrained from arguing for the first time. The contract I was looking at was lengthy, full of figure specifics and legalese. I might have been hesitant a year ago. Without thinking, I went for the pen now. "Are you certain about this?" I was questioned by the investor across from me. I grinned. "I constructed this. All of it." As I wrote my name at the bottom of the page, I felt more confident than ever. I sensed something more profound than merely relief. Liberty. With my workplace perched above the city, I walked to the window. I could see the skyline in front of me. There are countless opportunities just beyond the glass. I was looking the other way for the first time in my life. I was no longer fleeing from anything. I was right in my element. We learn things from life sometimes in the most difficult and agonizing ways. But if I've learned anything, it's this. The people who have harmed you do not define you. The past which attempted to shatter you cannot hold you back. You are more than the voices that told you weren't good enough, the hurt and the betrayal. Leaving harmful relationships behind was not the only reason to walk away. It was about taking back my own authority. It was about realizing that you can't get closure from someone else. You have to make it for yourself. I was genuinely free when I stopped waiting for excuses for justice or for approval. Perhaps you have had a similar circumstance to me. Perhaps you've put your trust in the wrong individuals, clung to someone or something that never stopped you. Perhaps you waited for change for years, but it never materialized. If my story leaves you with even one thing, let's do this. Permission to start afresh is not required. It's not necessary for someone else to recognize your value. You've had it already, and everything changes the instant you recognize that. I would be delighted to hear from you now. For your own peace, have you ever had to leave something or someone behind? Did you ever feel that you deserved better at any point in your life? Tell me in the comments below, tell me where you're watching from, or drop an inch if this story spoke to you. Connecting with you would be wonderful. If you didn't enjoy this tale, please explain why your opinion is important. Make sure to subscribe to the channel if you enjoyed this video so you don't miss the next one. I'm eager to share it with you yet. There's always more to tell. Till the next occasion, keep in mind that what you do next defines you, not your history. That's what matters most.